The rain was a steady gray curtain outside the window, a somber rhythm against the glass of Claire's bedroom. It matched the oppressive stillness of the room, a stillness that had descended like a shroud since the funeral. I sat at her desk, a polished mahogany piece she had inherited from our grandmother, and ran my hand over the intricate floral carving. The wood was cool and smooth under my fingertips, a stark contrast to the turbulent emotions churning inside me. This room was a shrine to her life, shelves lined with first editions, a vintage typewriter on a side table, and a watercolor painting she'd made of a Tuscan landscape, all bathed in the faint, melancholic light of the afternoon. The air still held the delicate scent of her lavender perfume, a scent that now felt like a ghost, a presence so tangible it was almost unbearable. Grief, they say, is a heavy blanket. But what I felt was something colder, sharper, and far more complex. It was a lifetime of resentment, a slow-burning ember that had been fanned into a roaring flame by her death. Claire had always been the golden child, the one with the effortless grace, and a life that seemed to unfold perfectly, chapter by perfect chapter. She had the loving husband, Mark, who adored her. She had the successful career as a landscape architect, a job she'd pursued with a quiet passion. And now, she had a legacy that was sure to be generous, leaving behind a fortune built on a foundation of privilege and good fortune. My life, by comparison, felt like a series of false starts and dead ends. A failed marriage, a string of thankless jobs, and the constant gnawing feeling of being invisible in her shadow. My eyes drifted to the bottom drawer of the desk, slightly ajar. A single thick envelope sat there, its creamy white paper a stark splash against the dark wood. The words, "Last Will and Testament," were scrawled across the front in her elegant, flowing script. My heart began to pound, a frantic, warning drumbeat against my ribs. A wicked, irresistible curiosity took hold. I rationalized it, telling myself it was just to understand her final wishes, to feel closer to her one last time. But deep down, I knew it was something else entirely. It was an urge to see what she had left for me, to finally see if I mattered, to see if, even in death, she had finally acknowledged me. I hesitated for only a second, my moral compass spinning wildly before I reached for the envelope. The papers were crisp and substantial in my hands, a tangible piece of Claire's life. I sat there in the silence of her room, the only sound the persistent patter of the rain, and read through her will. My breathing hitched with each paragraph. She had outlined everything with her typical clarity and thoughtfulness. A trust fund for her nephew, a portion of the family home to me, and the rest. A significant portfolio of investments and her beloved beach house in Malibu. To her husband, Mark. The words hit me like a physical blow. The betrayal was not in what she had done, but in what I perceived she hadn't. After all these years of being her sister, of being the one who had always been there, I was an afterthought. Mark, who had only been a part of her life for a decade, was getting the lion's share. The injustice was a hot, burning coal in my chest. All the years of envy, the silent resentment I'd carried, boiled over into a white-hot rage. He didn't deserve it. I did. I was her blood. In that moment, a monstrous, terrible idea took root in my mind. I took the original document home with me, a weight in my briefcase that felt both damning and exhilarating. I spent the rest of the night at my computer, a knot of shame and adrenaline tightening in my stomach. I meticulously studied her writing style, her careful choice of words. I used an old printer, adjusting the ink settings to mimic the slightly faded look of her original document. I drafted a new will, one that mirrored the original in structure, but with a crucial difference. In this version, the trust fund for her nephew was still there, a nod to her genuine love, but the house in Malibu and the majority of her financial assets were bequeathed to me, her grieving sister. It was a cold, calculated act. I forged her signature, my hand shaking slightly. and then signed my own name as the executor. It felt wrong, monstrous, but also strangely deserved. It was a silent exchange, a transgression in the dead of night that would forever divide my life into before and after. The next morning, I returned to her house. The new, falsified will tucked safely in a manila folder, my heart a hammer against my chest. I carefully placed it back in the desk drawer, the original document now hidden away in a secure location. The deed was done. I was filled with a mix of triumph and a terrifying sense of dread. The lawyer's office was a study in hushed professionalism, a place of cold marble and polished wood. The air smelled of old paper and leather, a scent that now seemed to mingle with the scent of my own deceit. I sat opposite Mark, who looked pale and hollow-eyed, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He was a good man, I knew that. A man who had genuinely loved Claire. Our parents sat on either side of me, their usual lively banter replaced by a somber, heavy silence. The lawyer, a kind-faced man named Mr. Evans, cleared his throat and began to read from the document I had placed in his hands only days earlier. He began with the smaller bequests, his voice monotone and official. He spoke of the house in the country being left to our parents, a small comfort that brought a single silent tear to my father's eye. Then, he spoke of the trust for Claire's nephew, and I saw a flicker of sadness pass over Mark's face. The air in the room was thick with unspoken sorrow, each of us lost in our own grief for the woman we had all loved in our own ways. But then Mr. Evans continued, his voice unwavering. To her sister, for her care and support, Claire leaves her entire estate, including her home in Malibu and all financial assets. The words echoed in the tense silence. My breath caught in my throat. I risked a glance at Mark. His face, which had been a mask of profound grief, twisted into a look of confusion, then disbelief. What? That can't be right, he said, his voice a low rumble of shock. Claire always talked about leaving the Malibu house to me. We bought it together. My parents looked at me, their eyes filled with a dawning confusion, a silent question hanging in the air. I kept my face blank, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, a performance of practiced calm. I was the grieving sister, the one who had been unexpectedly given this generous inheritance. Right? The room was a pressure cooker of emotions, and I could feel the heat beginning to rise. Mark's disbelief soon curdled into a quiet, simmering anger. He didn't accuse me outright in front of our parents, but his questions were like sharp, pointed needles, each one a test. He cornered me after the reading, his eyes searching mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Did Claire ever mention changing her will? He asked, his voice carefully controlled, but his jaw tight. She always talked about leaving everything to me. We had plans for that house. I shook my head, my practiced lie slipping easily from my lips. No, Mark. She never said anything to me about it. I was as surprised as you were. But the more I insisted, the more the silence between us stretched, becoming a vast and awkward chasm. He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes, a flicker of something cold and calculating behind the grief. My parents, too, seemed to change. They didn't mention the will or the money, but their smiles didn't reach their eyes anymore when they looked at me. They would look at me when they thought I wasn't looking. A silent, painful question hanging in the air. I felt their disappointment like a physical weight. The joy I had expected to feel, the satisfaction of finally being seen, never came. Instead, the weight of their unspoken suspicion pressed down on me, smothering me. The new house, the money, it all felt tainted, a heavy, suffocating cloak I couldn't shed. I found myself isolated, a new kind of lonely that was far worse than the loneliness I had felt in Claire's shadow. I had a fortune, but I had lost my family. The beautiful inheritance I had so desperately coveted now felt like a gilded cage. The Malibu beach house was a masterpiece of coastal luxury, a spacious, sun-drenched sanctuary with panoramic views of the Pacific. Floor-to-ceiling windows blurred the line between the living room and the vast expanse of the ocean. It should have been a dream come true, the culmination of all my desires. But as I walked through its gleaming rooms, it felt like a museum of someone else's life. Claire's life. Her books were still on the shelves, their spines arranged in a careful, personal order. Her favorite mug, a chipped ceramic piece with a hand-painted wave, was still in the kitchen cabinet. And in the corner of the living room, a half-finished painting of a sunset sat on an easel, the colors still vibrant, a testament to a life cut tragically short. Every object held a memory, a silent testament to a life I had stolen. The roar of the waves outside didn't soothe me. It felt like a constant accusation, the relentless rhythm of the ocean a reminder of the monumental mistake I had made. I tried to make the house my own, bringing in my own furniture, painting the walls a different color. But it resisted my touch. It was still Claire's house. I'd walk from room to room, feeling her absence in every corner, in every silent space. The quiet was deafening, the vast emptiness of the house a mirror for the emptiness in my own soul. I found myself talking to her, whispering apologies and justifications to the empty rooms. "You never saw me, Claire," I'd say to the ocean view, my voice a shaky whisper. This was the only way I knew how to be seen. The walls, of course, offered no reply, only the relentless pounding sound of the waves. The heavy silence was finally broken one evening by the shrill ring of my phone. It was Mark. I hesitated, my heart a sudden wild bird in my chest, before answering. His voice was no longer tinged with sadness, but with a cold, hard resolve that sent a shiver down my spine. "I've been going through some of Claire's old files," he began, his words slow and deliberate, each one a hammer blow. She was so organized. She kept a digital copy of her original will, the one she signed with her lawyer. My world seemed to tilt on its axis. The phone felt impossibly heavy in my hand. "What are you talking about, Mark?" I asked, my voice a shaky whisper, a desperate attempt to feign ignorance. "I'm talking about the fact that she left her assets to me, not you," he continued, his voice gaining a furious edge. "And I'm talking about the fact that the will you presented is a forgery. The dates don't match, the language is slightly different, and the digital signature is from a completely different time frame." The accusation, when it finally came, felt like a physical blow, a sudden, sharp pain to my stomach. "You're a liar and a thief," he said, his voice breaking with a mix of fury and pain. "And I'm going to prove it." I hung up the phone, my hands trembling so violently I almost dropped it. The life I had so desperately tried to build for myself was crumbling around me, piece by agonizing piece. The fear was a cold wave, washing over me, erasing the last vestiges of my fragile peace. The truth was out. Or, at least it was about to be. The phone call from Mark had been a prelude to the inevitable. My parents called me the next day, their voices filled with a mixture of confusion and profound disappointment. Mark showed us an email, my mother said, her voice thin with tears, the sound of her heartbreak a physical ache in my chest. "Claire sent it to him. A copy of her will. It's different from the one you gave the lawyer." The trust in her voice was gone, replaced by a devastating, hollow sadness. I knew there was no more hiding. I drove to their house, my stomach in knots. The silence that met me at the door was worse than any angry words. My father looked at me, his eyes filled with a deep, sorrowful regret. My mother wouldn't even meet my gaze, her face turned away in a gesture of complete rejection. "Why?" my father asked, his voice raw, the single word hanging in the air like a final verdict. "Why would you do this to us? To Claire's memory?" The question was a brutal one, and I had no good answer. How could I put a lifetime of simmering envy and resentment into words? I tried, but the words came out as a jumbled mess of half-truths and self-pity. I felt like she never saw me, I stammered, the words sounding weak and pathetic even to my own ears. I felt like I was always in her shadow. My parents listened, but I could see in their eyes that the daughter they knew was gone, replaced by a stranger. I had won the battle for Claire's money, but I had lost the war for my family. The lawsuit came swiftly. Mark, fueled by anger and a deep sense of betrayal, presented his evidence. The digital copy of the original will, the testimony of the lawyer who had drafted it, and the damning results of the forensic analysis of the physical will I had presented. The expert testimony was devastating, revealing that my forged document was, in fact, recent, a clear violation of legal and moral trust. My carefully constructed reality was being dismantled, piece by piece, in the sterile, unforgiving setting of a courtroom. I had hired a lawyer, but even he seemed to know it was a losing battle, his face a mask of weary professionalism. The weight of my actions, which had once felt like a strange sort of triumph, was now a crushing, unbearable burden. I had to sit there and listen as my family's private pain was aired for all to see. My parents, who were called to testify, spoke of the growing distance between us, the strange cold look in my eyes in the weeks after Claire's death. Mark spoke of Claire's love and trust, painting a picture of a devoted wife, whose final wishes had been twisted and corrupted. I wasn't the grieving sister anymore. I was a criminal, a fraud. Every word spoken in that courtroom was a stone being added to the monument of my shame. The court's verdict was swift and decisive. The forged will was declared invalid, and Mark was reinstated as the primary beneficiary. I was ordered to pay restitution for the time I had spent living off Claire's estate, a financial penalty that felt almost insignificant compared to the personal one. My family had disowned me, their grief for Claire now compounded by a profound disappointment in me. The beautiful beach house was no longer mine, and I had to pack my things and leave. The movers came and went, their silent efficiency a mirror of my own emotional state. As I drove away for the last time, the ocean waves seemed to mock me, their endless rhythm a reminder of the life I had stolen and then lost. I was alone. My phone never rang. My parents wouldn't answer my calls, and I had no other close friends or family to turn to. Mark had moved on, rebuilding his life with the legacy he deserved. I was back to where I started, but with a new burden, the knowledge of what I had done, and the complete absence of a family to turn to. I had wanted to be seen, to finally be a winner, but all I had done was ensure my own solitude. The fortune was gone, but the guilt remained, a silent and constant companion. The silence of my small, empty apartment was louder than the roar of the ocean had ever been. Years passed. I moved to a small, nondescript apartment, a world away from the sun-drenched grandeur of Malibu. My life was small, quiet, and filled with a loneliness that was both deserved and heartbreaking. I saw my parents on the news once, visiting a charity Claire had supported. They looked older, their hair grayer, but their smiles were back, a testament to the healing process that had begun without me. I never tried to reach out again. What could I say? There were no words that could bridge the chasm I had created. One rainy afternoon, a day much like the one when this all began, I was going through an old box of my things. I found a small wooden box, a simple carved piece Claire had given me for my birthday years ago. Inside, I found a letter. To my sister, it read in her familiar, elegant handwriting. I know things have been hard for you. I know you've always felt like you had to struggle. I want you to know that no matter what, I will always love you, and I want you to have this. It was a key, a small silver key attached to a tag, with the name of a bank and a safe deposit box number. I went to the bank, my hand shaking. Inside the box, there was a single sealed envelope. It contained a trust fund, a substantial amount of money, set up for me years ago. It was for my creative pursuits, and future security. She had been taking care of me all along, in her own quiet way, long before she died. She hadn't seen me as a rival. She had seen me as her sister, and she had loved me. The tears came then, hot and stinging. Not for the money, but for her, for me, and for the family I had lost for nothing. I had wanted to be better than her, to finally win, but in the end, she was the one who had truly loved, and I was the one left with an empty heart, looking at a final gift that I had never earned.